Welcome back, everybody. Let's take a break with Stephen Shamus.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be here again. Thank you. Alex, good to see you. Always a pleasure.
Yes.
A few weeks ago, we took a trip down memory lane.
Yep.
And it was very popular. I think we had a good time. The feedback that we've gotten is that, the fans enjoyed it. So we did the 1980s, and now we're going to take you into the 1990s. A very fun decade.
When I wake up in the morning and the alarm gets out of warning, I don't think I'll ever make it on time.
A lot of good stuff to talk about.
I remember the 1990s. I'll have a little bit more. I remember that decade very well.
I remember that, so maybe you'll have a little bit more firsthand accounts of what went on.
Yes.
There was a lot of great stuff. As you start going through the timeline and looking at the stuff, you start to remember, oh, that was the 1990s. You start to lose track sometimes. Did it come out in the 80s? Did it come out in the 2000s? Did it come out? You do start to lose track. So I think we're going to have a good time today. I think we're going to have a good show. It's probably going to be in 2 pieces. So we'll probably give you part 1 today. We'll give you part 2 somewhere down the road.
Yep.
All right, Alex. So let's talk about some of the topics that we plan on discussing today.
Yeah, we're going to do, like you said, iconic covers, iconic comics. Most of this stuff is going to be like your hit list of the 1990s. Spider-Man comics, Batman adventures, not just Batman regular. There's stuff like the Carnage and Deadpool, Iron Man, stuff that's really hot right now that came out in the 90s. We'll even talk about the independent stuff. Preacher, Goon, stuff like that. Stuff that maybe if you're just like a Marvel or DC guy, you haven't really dived into. But we'll get it this week.
What I also found, which was interesting, as I went through this process, is how much of the storylines from the 1990s became used in today's television and film series, right? Like the source material is not from the 2000s or the 2000s. A lot of the source material is coming from the 1990s. It's an interesting era in terms of the writing and the storytelling from that era. And you'll start to see the connection between those books and the films and the TV shows that exist today, that really that is the original source material. Yeah. So I think it's very exciting. You'll start to see the pattern as we go through one by one. So Alex, let's talk about the first one.
Yep.
You ready?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, cool. So I think the first book, which is obviously going to be very important in the near future, Amazing Spider-Man number 361.
Yes.
That's a big one.
It's a big one.
That is a big one. Came out in 1992. There are over 3,600 CGC 9.8s.
Graded
blue labels.
9.8 out of 10. Yeah.
And 506 yellow label 9.8s. And that book is also considered a staple in all the collections. Sometimes we get on the air and we start talking about what's a staple book, what's a book that you have to have. That's why even with almost a 4,000 CGC blue label, and believe me, they printed a lot of copies of that book. That book is not a rare book. That book went into sleeves and backboards at the time. It was not a book that was banged around like some of the books we're going to talk about coming down the line. And it's still a $500+ book. Obviously, it's very relevant to the movies that is coming out. Why don't you talk a little bit about the Carnage character, 344 Cletus Cassidy, and then the film that's coming out?
Yeah, so at the end of, spoilers, anybody doesn't see it, at the end of the Venom movie, which was, I think, way beyond anybody's expectations of what it was going to be, really hit home. At the end, you see Cletus Cassidy in jail.
I'll get out of here, and I will. There's going to be carnage.
When that spoiler came out, or when that end credit scene came out, I think people had already bought a bunch of these 361s, the first branch of Carnage, before. But I think it really just was like the time and place. Everybody's like, okay, now I really want that, and I want it the best shape. And I think you really saw the kind of uptick on sales in this book. You mentioned that there's a lot of blue label 9.8s and a lot of yellow label 9.8s. The yellow labels usually are a little bit less because that's signature. The yellow label means someone signed that book. But Mark Bagley does a lot of shows, friend of Ace. The artist in the book, Randy Emberlin, the inker. I mean, you get these guys who are still around, still working in comics, to get these books signed, to get the yellow labels and get a nice copy. It's still a book that everybody wants.
What is it about the Carnage character that has resonated, especially today, where you're talking about a character that was created in 1992, and now it's in a film next year?
Yeah. I mean, Carnage, Marvel really pushed Carnage on people. They pushed Venom on people, and it took. People love Venom. They still love it. They've always loved it. And when Carnage came out, the villain of the Venom and Spider-Man, series, having Venom and Spider-Man kind of join forces and fight Carnage because he's just more crazy than everybody else. I mean, there was a video game franchise.
New York City. Panic. Terror. Chaos. And that was before Maximum Carnage.
Maximum Carnage series was humongous in the 90s. And you got to think, all the people that were young in the 90s that were teenagers growing up, that's something that it's nostalgia. Carnage, Venom, Spider-Man, that's all nostalgia for people of the 90s. So when you see Cletus Cassidy at the end of Venom, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm hyped. I want to see that movie. I'm ready. And Marvel knew it. They've been doing it for years. They tried with Spider-Man 3, Sam Raimi, to get Venom in. And then the franchise went a different direction after that. But they really hit home with the movie. They know that the fans really want Carnage, and it's coming.
And then speaking of Carnage, in 1996, there was a miniseries,
Yeah.
first solo miniseries, Carnage Mind Bomb. I don't think that series was printed in large quantities.
Not at all.
I don't even, I'm pretty good about remembering, like, oh, this book came out. I remember the cover. I do not remember that book in 1996. That book must have slid under the radar.
Yeah.
That book, Mind Bomb, 250 blue label 9.8s, 6 yellow label 9.8s. That book is $175 to $200.
Yeah.
I think if you're looking for a different option on Carnage, I think that's a good option.
Yeah, and that book is, to find that book raw and graded out at 9.8 might be a little bit easier than most because it is a cardstock cover, and those tend to save a little bit better. But that's definitely something that if you see a dealer or you see someone online that has that had near mint, look at the pictures, snag that for 25, 30 bucks raw, however it's selling raw, and get it graded. That's a good book to have. It's a great cover. It's a great Carnage cover.
Listen, there's almost 3,700 of the Spider-Man 361s, and there's only 250 of these.
Yeah.
So the big disparity, in my opinion, that's the book.
Yeah,
that's
I agree.
Book. So now we're going from books with a very large volume of printing to a character who, up until Margot Robbie took the character, was a very popular character, especially in the animated series.
I had a kitty once. They don't always land on their feet. Look on the bright side. Tomorrow you'll be feeding hundreds of hungry cats.
These books early on did not have the high print runs.
No.
And we'll talk a little bit about the newsstands. But of course, we're talking about Harley Quinn.
Yep.
2 films upcoming, both the Birds of Prey film, and then she'll be in Suicide Squad 2. Try saying that 10 times fast, Alex. Suicide Squad 2, right? James Gunn, definitely going to be a hit. No question about it. No question about it. So she first appeared in 1993. Again, people don't realize the original source material.
Yeah.
So when she first appeared, she appeared in the animated comics.
Yep.
Very interesting story, which you'll take us through in a minute. The number 12 book from 1993, they did not print a lot of copies of these books, and they got manhandled. They were kids' books.
Yep.
There are only 842, which actually is higher than you would have thought, blue label 9.8s, 34 yellow 9.8s. That book consistently, absolutely 100% sells between $1,500 and $2,000. You won't get it cheaper. They just don't sell cheaper. It's a staple book.
Yep.
Interestingly enough, CGC does not differentiate the newsstand covers.
Mm-hmm.
When the newsstand versions come up with the barcodes on them instead of the text words, those sell for $3,000. Like, you can't find them. Now, CGC, because they don't break it out, you don't really know how many are of the newsstand and how many of the direct market. I think that kind of caught on after CGC had already graded so many books that ship had sailed already. If you can find a newsstand book, that's the big money book. But explain to the fans, before we go into the future appearances of Harley Quinn, the difference between the original Harley Quinn animated and then take us into the live action Harley Quinn, which appeared in DC Comics continuity.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a funny thing when you have something like a character that was just based in the animated world. Batman, the animated series, huge cartoon for Warner Brothers, and a lot of kids in the late 90s growing up. That cartoon is probably the best Batman cartoon ever. But Harley Quinn, Bruce Timm Paul Dini, who created the character in the cartoon, it was a side character. I mean, she was definitely used a lot, but nobody really expected her to take off. That's why you don't see her in comics until she's in the animated comic. Again, kids comics, beaten the crap out of. Like, nobody takes care of that stuff.
Like you used to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, like I used to do. I think a lot of collectors kind of knew it at that time. Like, they were like, oh, it's a first appearance. Anytime there's a first appearance, I think a lot of collectors really will just grab them and just hope for the best. So I think that's why you see a handful of those out there that are pretty in high shape. But Harley Quinn, I mean, as a character for the DC universe, when you think of DC universe, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, maybe Green Lantern, and then Harley Quinn. Like, when you think of anybody else, Harley Quinn is the next character in that, rainbow of DC characters that are in the forefront. And she's been a fan favorite for years. And then Suicide Squad comes out. Margot Robbie killed it as the character. She really took that character and took it to the next level. And now she's blown up. She's everywhere. She's had her own series. I think her series is probably on par in the DC universe with Batman, Superman, and all the mainstays. It constantly sells. People constantly getting, buying those books. Harley Quinn's definitely not going anywhere anytime soon.
No. And then her origin story is in Mad Love, which appears in 1994. There are 253 blue labels of those. And then you have 28 yellow label 9.8s. And that book is about a $400 book, not cheap.
Yeah.
Now, it's a prestige format, so they tend, like you said, it tends to hold better.
Yep.
Right? But still, very low pop, high price, and I just think they just didn't print that many of them because the black chips easily on the front. It can be a little bit more difficult to get those 9.8s. Yeah,
she was, I mean, as a niche character goes, she was a niche character for a very long time, probably up until maybe late to early 2000s. I mean,
1999.
Yeah. I mean,
about that in a second.
Yeah, I mean, she was a character from the animated series. So unless you watched the animated series, you really didn't know who she was. And then she didn't become in the main DC universe until a little bit later.
So 1999, she appears on this iconic cover with the Joker from Alex Ross. That's another book that has been homaged many, many, many times. Yeah. Very, very popular book. That is her first time in the DC universe, not as the animated character. You actually couldn't have asked for a better image of her that really gives you, Alex Ross really hit a home run in that he gave you a version of the character which is exactly who she is, and it's splashed on the cover. Like we said, you don't always get that image, that iconic image.
Yeah. So
that's the one where they're dancing. It's been homaged to death, to the point where when we worked at one of our companies and we did the number 12 reprint of the Batman Adventures for the Comic-Con box, we used that homage of that cover to get Rick Burchett to do a new cover. Yeah. So that was very, very cool when Rick Burchett did his version of that cover as the animated cover. First reprint of that. Right, first reprint, right. We beat everybody to the punch. Those range from the Virgin covers to the sketch covers to the color covers. They range from 33 to 106 populations. Those are very affordable books. It's a great book if you ever want to go pick it up online. They won't cost you a lot of money. So in 1999, this book comes out. There are 919 blue labels. There are 50 yellow label 9.8s. There are actually 6 and 9.9s. And that book is a consistent $250 to $300 rock solid seller. Great book. Recommend it. That's like the book for her in the first DCU.
Yeah.
Now we come to a very interesting character that is known by kids all over through the Scholastic Publishing.
Mm-hmm.
We've known Jeff Smith for 20 some odd years. He used to come to the shows. Sometimes he would sit in the artist alley. Sometimes he would have his booth. Very low-key guy, immensely talented. Created a character in 1991 called Bone.
Meet Phone Bone, Phony Bone, and Smiley Bone, 3 cousins lost far from home.
Hello! Hello!
In a strange new world.
Hey, watch it! Sorry.
Where new adventures await and new dangers lurk.
Mr. Dragon?
Yeah.
This character has endured forever. Scholastic publishes these books. Kids know Bone because that's the volumes that they read.
Yep.
Scholastic really pumped this up. Jeff is an amazing creator, always stayed down to earth, always loved to visit his fans. And this book came out in 1991 because at the time it was an indie and it was under Cartoon Books
Self-published,
label,
yeah.
Self-published. There were not a lot of copies printed of the first prints. First prints are impossible to find. They are impossible to find. Even issues 2, 3, 4, those very early issues are very hard to find. So we're going to give you some pricing on some 9.4s and 9.6s because we don't expect you to find any 9.8s. That book, there are 16 blue labels. There are 2 yellow labels. A 9.4 will set you back about $2,500. A 9.6 is a little bit over $3,000. Good luck finding a 9.8. You probably won't see one. If you do, good luck. Try to get it. What do you think it is about the Bone character and the family that made it such a family favorite for young kids, where Scholastic said, this is the one, this is the character that we're going to pull out? It's almost like it's a Disney type of a character that Scholastic was able to push out.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head right there. It's a very wholesome book. It's very easy to look at. It's very easy to read without it being geared for the easy reader. I never read Bone in single issues. I bought when the 1 volume 1,000 pages came out. I snagged it. That's when I read it, and I think I read it all in one sitting, and it took me all day. Like I sat, read it, ate some lunch, read it, ate dinner, finished it when we go to bed. It's one of those books that is just. When he wrote Bone, when Jeff Smith wrote Bone and drew Bone, he wasn't thinking, oh, this is going to be great for kids. Oh, this is going to be great for the family. He's like, oh, this is the story I have. Let's go. And like you said, it's like a Disney feel. It's these 3 characters. They're brothers. They get exiled from their home, and it's just they've never been out in the wilderness. Almost like The Hobbit, if you want to kind of like, think about it the same way. They have no idea what's going on out in the world. They run into different characters and how they deal. It has a happy ending, spoilers. But it's one of those books that you can always give to a kid, and you get that first volume and you read it, and he'll be like, okay, cool. Give me more. I mean, it's almost the American Tintin, if you want to think of it like that. It's definitely a book.
Now you mention it, I've been sending some books to my friend's daughter. I'm going to order Bone today on Amazon. I'm going to send her the Big Bone book. You're right.
It's a perfect book.
It's perfect.
The fact that these books are so high right now, and they're only been reprinted by school. Like, there's no movie, there's no cartoon, there's not. I don't even think there's talk
hard to
about
believe,
it.
right?
Right. It'll happen. It'll eventually happen. It's going to happen. DreamWorks, somebody's going to eat that up and make a movie, and then these books are even going to go higher.
The characters endured for almost 30 years, Alex.
And no mainstream media, just books, just Scholastic pushing them through libraries and schools.
Yeah, incredible. Great job there. So we're going to go from one end of the G-rated spectrum all the way 180 degrees, all the way here. So even before Ryan Reynolds put on the suit, whether it was the first time against Wolverine or whether he had the solo movie, the Deadpool character has struck a nerve with people.
Kind of prefer Marvel movies. We are Marvel. Yeah, but you're Marvel licensed by Fox. It's like if the Beatles were produced by Nickelback. It's music, but it sucks.
Hey, that's it. I'm done. I've had it with all this Nickelback hating, all right? You think that makes you cool with the cool kids in school, Fred?
No, it just makes me right.
And has really, again, another character that has endured. That character came out in the early 90s. Originally We saw him in New Mutants number 98, 1990. And then on to his Deadpool, the Circle Chase. So we'll talk about both of those. So that New Mutants 98, again, that was a book that was highly printed, highly coveted, went right into bags right away, was a very, very popular book even at the time. That character right out of the gate was very popular.
Yeah.
That didn't take a lot of time. It didn't like have to sit around and percolate a little bit. And it, Ryan Reynolds, I mean, again, you're talking about somebody who embodies the character. I mean, boom, right? It's like I don't know that you could even envision, it's not like the Batman character. He had Keaton and then this one, it's like, and then Christian Bale. It's like, could you envision anyone else playing that Deadpool character, right?
No.
Like I don't know that they would have even bothered doing it if you couldn't get Ryan to do the character, because I don't know that anyone else could pull it off.
Yeah.
Right? So let's first talk about New Mutants 98. There are almost 3,200 9.8s.
It's a lot of
There are 532 yellow 9.8s, 12 blue label 9.9s, and there's actually one 10.0. I can't even imagine what that would sell for. And that book consistently sells for $800 to $900. It's a book that people love to get Liefeld to sign at the shows.
Yep.
If, God willing, Ryan ever decides to do a show, you're going to see plenty of those.
Yes.
You'll absolutely see plenty of those. And then that book leads into Deadpool, the Circle Chase, which came out in 1993. Joe Madureira. Now, that was Joe Mad at his peak.
Yeah, yeah.
That was, when you look at those Joe Mad pages, that was Joe Mad. Like, it didn't get any better than that Joe Mad style.
Yeah.
Like, Joe Mad was crushing it.
Yep.
Back then. So, again, at the time, when you go back to 1993, Joe Mad, Deadpool, hot character, that first issue, the simplicity of it with the big letters is unbelievable. Fun fact, my brother owns all the issues with all the covers from the day it came out, 27 years he's owned the whole thing.
Wow.
And the covers are magnificent. They are magnificent. So that book, there's 1,144 blue label 9.8s, 158 yellow 9.8s, 6 and 1 of the 9.9s, and 1 10.0. That book is $100 to $150. If you're going to buy a book, that's a great buy.
Yeah, definitely.
So
cardstock covers as well. Yeah.
Right. So talk to us a little bit. Two things I want you to talk about. First thing I want you to talk about Joe Madureira, and then the second thing is the Deadpool character and why it's endured with the R rating.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Joe Mad, that era of Marvel stuff, he was killing it. And I think he's one of the best examples of someone that is popular in his profession and then jumps to go to another profession and also is popular in that profession, because he jumps and goes right to video games and battle chasers and stuff, and it just he takes off. And that's it's one of those dreams of an artist, like, oh, I want to draw in comics, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, these video games, and like I can do it all. And I mean, he's your staple story of that, and still doing comics, still doing video games to this day. Also a really nice guy. When you start looking at that book and then the second series, the Joe Kelly, Ed McGuinness full run, where the Deadpool that you see on the movies is that Deadpool. It's the Joe Kelly, Ed McGuinness run. And it's funny because, working in a shop, everybody's on, people love Deadpool, and, well, why Deadpool? It's the best of both worlds. It's a SpiderMan with his funny quips, and it's the if you want to say violent Wolverine, and the healing factor. When you get two of those things combined, I mean, you get Deadpool. I mean, people love Wolverine, people love Spider-Man. You put them together, there's Deadpool, and it's an anti-hero, but it's funny, and you don't get a lot of that in comics anymore. It's either Batman who's super serious, Superman who's a little bit lighthearted, Spider-Man who's jokey, but again lighthearted. You get everything with Deadpool. It's
very hard to write funny. That. Very, very hard. So, Alex, before we move on to the next topic, let's do Alex's pick of the week.
Hey,
we don't want to leave you out, Alex.
This week's gonna be a little different. I know we always talk about comics. I'm gonna talk about trading cards. Yes, people still buy trading cards.
Oh, big time.
I am one of them. I think you've seen it in the last handful of years that it's actually getting bigger, and and more people are getting into that. One of the things that has just come out is Topps' Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker card sets. Now, if you're a Star Wars fan, I am obviously. These cards are really fun because every box, if you're a box guy, I'm a box guy. I buy a box. They'll run you about like $60 to $100 depending on. Usually, every box has an autograph in it, at least one. So every box you open, you're gonna get one autograph from someone that was in the movie.
So who'd you get?
I haven't opened my box yet. Yeah, I'm waiting. But
I'm on pins and needles over here, Alex.
I mean, I've gotten some autographs in the past from the other boxes, the other movies. Characters from the animated show they'll put in there. They do movies. I have an Ashley Eckstein, which is probably my favorite card.
Married to famous baseball player David Eckstein, World Series MVP.
That's it. That's him. I just think it's neat. And if you're not into cards, if you're a comic book person, or you're just kind of into like maybe you go to shows, you go to our shows and you get autographs, this is a neat way to kind of like, I don't want to say gamble, but it's almost like a scratch off ticket. I like the chase. I like this. You buy a box, you never know what you're going to get, and it could be Daisy Ridley, or it could be the guy who plays Admiral Akbar, which I do have his card, and I love it and cherish it. But I think it's a fun thing. I know Marvel does them. I know Star Wars has cards. Pretty much every card set that comes out now will have autographs in them or sketch cards.
All right, so make sure we show a picture of that box, Alex, of what people
will do. But that's my pick of the week.
Great. So I think we're going to cover one more topic, and we're going to wrap up part 1 of Back to the 90s. So the last one we want to talk about is a guy who appeared at our show in Seattle, another guy who was able to pick up the mantle in Iron Man 2 and really make the character his own.
Yeah.
And that is Don Cheadle playing War Machine.
Don't move! Hang on a second.
And he did such a great job with the character. You know, it's a complicated character. It's not easy to share a screen with Robert Downey Jr.
Right.
A lot of people have tried.
Yeah.
And it's not simple. And Don pulls it off big time. When you see him, he's War Machine.
Yeah.
He is every bit War Machine. He nailed it. He knows how to play off Robert. He knew how to play off the rest of the Avengers in the films. So that book is a great cover. I love that cover. I love 283 also, by the way.
Right, yeah.
Second appearance.
Yeah.
So 282 Iron Man from 1992 is his first appearance. The 283 is really nice as well, by the way.
Yeah, it's a group cover, yeah.
Yeah, so you don't want to get lost there. But 282, 554 blue label 9.8s, 52 yellow 9.8s. That book sells consistently between $175 and $200. I think that's a cheap price for that character because it's kind of a main Avenger character in the films. Very cool when we had Don. A lot of people, including myself, had Don sign a copy of that.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a few out there that I've seen, that I saw at the signing, that I've seen for sale. If you can get yourself a signature series version by Don Cheadle, I would do it. I think it's going to be harder and harder to get these celebrity autographs on these types of books with the virus and everything that's going on. We don't know when these types of actors are going to be out there again. So, you know what? You may even want to buy a signature series with Don if you could find one.
Yeah.
But a very, very cool book. Talk to us about the character War Machine and where the character started, where it is today. Is the character that we saw in 282, is that the one that we see in the films?
Yeah, I mean, Roddy is pretty much taken right from the books and into the movies. Even with Terrence Howard playing him, and he also did a great job in Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2 when Don Cheadle comes in. I mean, War Machine is definitely a 90s character. 90s were big guns, big explosions. That was the time. And right. I mean, they took Iron Man, which is classic, give him War Machine. He had the big Gatling gun on his shoulder. He was bigger, he was stronger. And the character in the books these days isn't as prevalent as the ones how he is in the movie, but he's definitely a character that, a lot of people recognize. It's a lot that the Iron Man suit with the Gatling gun, that's it. I mean, once you see that, you know it's War Machine. And in the movie, when he gets in that suit and the machine pops up, everybody, hooped and hollered.
Right. All right, Alex, I think that's it for part 1.
Yeah.
Going back in time. So we hope to see you soon again for part 2.
Yeah.
And do you have any other final thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely, like you were saying, grab a 282, grab an Iron Man 282. It's a good book to grab. Grab a 283. It's worth it.
Yeah, the 283 is pretty cool too.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, thank you very much. We will see you next week. Same bat time.
Same bat channel. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.